stream. I do not have Bruce. I do not have a computer. Waiting in the car for my daughter and her friends to get out of a youth group. But as I sit here, let me switch hands here. It is, first of all, it is a gorgeous, gorgeous night here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I just want to show you around Lancaster. Guys, I'll never forget when I moved here about 14 years ago. I moved here, and it was a wild ride. It was a big decision. It was a tough decision. Um, so let me walk you through the timeline. I grew up in Philadelphia, lived with mom until I was like 30. Met my wife on September 7th, 2001. We had our first date on 9/11. That's right, when the planes hit. Got engaged that February. Got married that October. My best friend died that January. So that brings us to 2002, which is October 5th, 2002 is will be my 24th anniversary. I'm walking through the timeline of my life here. After that, when we got married, we wanted to move back to her hometown, which was about 3 hours away from Philadelphia in central Pennsylvania. And the only way we were going to make that happen is I had to find a job out there. So I did. I found a job first, and I had to live with my in laws without my wife. She was still back in Philly living in our apartment, and I lived with my in laws. That was kind of awkward. What it was is my wife's father had a friend who was in charge of this construction company, and they needed an IT guy. Their IT guy quit, and I didn't have an IT job yet, but I just got out of IT school. So, I mean, I was working here and there in IT. It's not true. It wasn't my first job. It was my first official being on a team kind of job. Like I was doing contracting and that kind of stuff. So, anyway, 2003, my wife finally moves up. So now we lived with her parents for about a year. And then I got my first house. I'll never forget it, on Blair Street, $105,000. What's up, Apex? I am walking through the timeline of my life. Am I gay? No, bro, you're out of here, bro. Um, so walking through the timeline of my life. 2004, get my first house. Stay there till about 2008. Now, in that house on Blair Street, my son was born 2006, and my daughter was born, Ella, 2008. So, 2008, got both kids are born. Uh, I don't know if you watched my live stream, but I was we're not far from Williamsport, which was called Little Philly, and some big guy comes walking down the street, and here I am mowing my lawn on a Friday night, dark, and I know like less than a mile and a half away is trouble, the bad neighborhoods. We lived in a very nice, suburban like neighborhood, but very close to the trouble. And this guy comes up to me. I see him coming. I'm like, come on, man. Are you going to approach me? Um, I should be a Formula One driver. No. Anyway, so this guy, here we are, 2008. So this big guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, I need gas. I got to get to Lancaster. I need about $20." And he says to me, "I know I'm big and black and scary looking. And I even went to the church right there and they said they didn't have anything." And he wasn't even being nice and friendly. He was being aggressive, expecting, you know, not like, "Hey man, please help me out." Like, no, he wasn't like that, or I would have helped him. He offered to mow my lawn, which was just about done. And I said, "Well, listen, I don't have any cash on me. I use all credit." But I said, "I do got a jar of change. Let me go in the house and get it." So I ran into the house and grabbed the jar, told my wife, watch if anything goes down, call the police. Um, so I come outside, I hand him a big jar of change, had to be at least $20 in there, and he looks at it with disappointment and turns his back and just slowly starts walking away. I said, "We got to move. I can't, back then when I had my first IT job, I was traveling a lot. We had other sites in Maryland, all over the place. And I had New York. I had to travel and stay at hotels all the time. What if that was my wife out there with my two kids, newborns? You know, I said, "We got to move. We can't stay here next to Williamsport." And so we did. So we moved about 15 minutes away, two doors down from her parents' house. Um, this little old lady was going to move into a retirement home. So we just got lucky. So the house didn't even go up on the market or anything like that. I knocked on her door. Her name was Mary. And I said, "I heard you're interested in selling this, from my wife's mother." And so she agreed to sell it. So we moved into Mary's. That was 2008. I actually had to move back into my in laws for 2 months while we got everything arranged. So we moved back in, then stayed at Mary's till about 2011. Actually, it was 2012, August 15th. I remember the date because that's the first date we bought our house here down in Lancaster. So 2000, my third child was born June 3rd, 2011, Catherine, and August of 2012 we moved down here to Lancaster. Um, my mom and my dad, they're saying, "Hey, we never get to see the kids. They're 3 hours away." So I said to my wife, "Do you mind if we move? Your mom we live two doors down and she got the first, good 5 years of my son's life." And she agreed. So, uh, man, that was crazy. We must have looked at about 50 houses before, finally I found a house. Well, I didn't find it. My wife, she had a list of like 500 things that whatever we were going to move and to meet all the criteria on this list. And we were driving 3 hours every weekend back and forth. This poor lady, God bless her soul, this realtor showed us 50 to 60 houses, uh, the patience of a saint. And finally, we found a house, and it was all by accident because this house was like $40,000 over my budget. And my wife, she said, "This house meets all the criteria." And I said, "I don't care." I said, "It's $40,000 over our budget." So I told the realtor, "Take the house off the list this weekend. We can't. I don't care if we like it. We can't afford it." Well, behind my back, my wife called her up and said, "Put the house, I just want to see it. Put the house back on the list." So after we saw 5 houses, again, my wife picked them all apart. No, no, no. We come to the final house, which is the one I'm living in now. And we pull up, and I was like, I said, "Come on. You know we can't afford this." I said, "I'm not going in. I'm not going in." She said, "I don't care. You stay here. I'll take the kids in." "Go ahead." I said, "I'm not getting out of this car." So as I'm sitting in the car, I look to my left and there's a neighbor and her son and another son are beating each other up. And they're about 2 years older than my son, or 4 years older. And I'm like, no way could we live here. These kids have beat up my son. So, what's up, Tristan? Just walking through the timeline of my life. And the reason I'm doing that is because of this building right back there. There's a reason I am telling you guys this story. I'm working my way up to that building and the significance that that building played in my life and my kids' life. So now, if you guys haven't saw the beginning of my timeline, go back and watch this later. Right now, we're at 2012. Um, we're in my wife's hometown. At this point, we're driving down to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We're seeing about 5 to 6 houses a weekend, every weekend. It took about 60 houses before finally we found a house that met everything on the list that my wife needed or wanted. Couldn't have a house on a corner. Had to have a flat driveway. Had to have a half an acre of grass. Had to have 3 or 4 bedroom. There was just a list that went on and on and on. So we find this house. It's $40,000 over budget. I didn't go in. I look over and I see two boys rough housing really hard that would kill my son, who's 4 years younger than them. So I'm waiting, man. I'm waiting in that car now about 45 minutes. And I'm saying, what is going on? She knows we can't afford it. What? What? So finally, my wife comes out by herself, not with the kids. She says, "Come inside. Mel wants to talk to you." Who's Mel? He's the guy that had this house built. He lives in there with his wife. I said, "No, I'm not going in and talking to him. It's 40 grand over the limit that I set. And the limit I set was too high as it is." She says, "Come inside." I know that look on my wife's face. So I went in to talk to Mel. Old man, about 80. And he says, "Jeff, your wife explained everything to me." He says, you know, you know my price that I wanted, but she explained your situation. And he says, "I want to leave this neighborhood with a good family." He said, "Look at next door." I looked next door, big house. The grass is about 4 feet high in the backyard. It was awful. It was a scruffy old maintenance guy living in there. He said, "Do you see that next door?" He said, you know, his house is going to foreclose. I want this to be a good neighborhood. And he says, "I'm willing to come down in my price, but I have a few conditions." First thing he said to me was, "Make me an offer." So I told him my top price. He said, "Would you go 5,000 more?" Yeah. Okay. So we agreed on the price. He came down like 35 grand. And I said, "Well, what are your conditions?" He says, "Come out back with me." And out back, he had a beautiful vineyard. Like, wow. He's like, "Do you see this?" He said, "I worked years to build up this vineyard. I want you to maintain it and keep it and make wine." He said, "Do you like wine?" I said, "I love red wine." I said, "I even have a food science degree, even though I'm in computers now. So I kind of know a little bit about the biology behind all this and the chemistry." And he said, "Perfect. I got all the equipment." So we agreed. Step number or condition number two, he had three gigantic, when like what water comes into when you get water out of a machine, those big containers. He had 3 of those full, those gigantic water jug things. He says, "I want you to buy my wine off of me." He said, $200 and you get all 3. And he's like, "That wine will last you years." I said, "Okay." He said, "The third thing, I want you to buy the bed upstairs for $250." I paid 1,000 for it. I said, "Deal." And he shook my hand and we had a deal. And I couldn't believe it. Beautiful. The garage was finished. Drywall in the garage. You guys have seen my garage. A shed right there. Beautiful shed. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Backyard, almost 3/4 of an acre. Wonderful neighborhood. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. So I think people are starting to come out. Anyway, so now we had to move down here. And my wife wanted the kids to go to a private school like she went to, a Christian private school. And hence that building. I didn't realize how much that cost. Man, they were robbing me. Man, it was like 8, 9,000 a child, and it was about a half-hour ride. But I agreed to move down here. I said one of her conditions was the kids have got to go to a private school. So every day, right there, those doors, every day, starting in 2012, all the way up. Now, my son and daughter left around fourth grade, 2000, I don't know, 17-ish. And my one other daughter, Ella, stayed every day. I remember walking through those doors as the kids real small, kindergarten, pre-K, all the way through fourth grade, walking through, walking them down every day, every day. And the whole ride down here was a 35-minute ride. It's just ironic that my daughter is going to youth group right across the street at a totally separate church. That's not even a church. That's just a private school. But yeah, so that made me think about the timeline of my life. And wow, so much has transpired since. My son, we pulled him out of there. He wasn't getting along with kids. Kids weren't being nice to him. He stayed home. And then my daughter, Catherine, ended up coming out of there too. And then she ended up going to public school. And so did my other daughter, Ella, to finish their school years out at public school. But that's it. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking at that. And the car I bought, I remember the Prius, my red Prius. I bought it brand new from Toyota. I remember bringing it into this parking lot. I still got it. It's one of my main 2 cars. It's got like 202,000 miles on it now. Took it off the lot with 0. There you go. There's my surprise live stream. A little timeline of my life. I'm going to be home. We're going to play poker tonight. We're going to have another live stream in about 90 minutes, the normal after dark stream. But there you go, folks. Those who want to know, who are interested, if you can learn anything, I hope you can. Any questions, I'll help you any way I can.